Do they teach you about cavemen here in Idaho in school? Cavemen are kind of interesting because they learned how to, the Neanderthals, they learned how to start fire. The people before the Neanderthals didn't know how to start fire, and they'd have to wait till lightning struck a tree, and they'd have to run around carrying a burning log, and when it was just about ready to go out, they'd have to set another log on fire so they could run around, carry this burning log. They just have to keep lighting logs. They could never let the fire go out because they didn't know how to start fire. Well, the Neanderthals up in the mountains of Europe figured out by using iron pyrite or fool's gold, iron pyrite or fool's gold, they learned that if they kind of hit them together with a flint that they were making arrowheads and spearheads and axe heads out of, that they could start fire whenever they wanted to. So they could run around with just a piece of fool's gold or iron pyrite and a piece of flint the size of a nickel in their hand or in a little leather bag. They could start a fire whenever they wanted to. So that was a big advance. And these Neanderthals would live 4 times the age of sexual maturity, whereas the people before them only lived to sexual maturity. They never lived into their 20s. The Neanderthals were the first peoples to live 4 or 5 times the age of sexual maturity. And there's reasons for that, as you'll see in a minute. They were also the first people to bury their dead. We have 10,000 complete skeletons of Neanderthals and no complete skeletons of anybody else because the Neanderthals would bury their dead. And there were no tools or weapons or jewels or any fancy stuff or writing or carvings on stone in their graves. There was only one thing in the graves of the Neanderthals. In every one of the 10,000 graves was a little clay pot full of wood ashes. Wood ash is the byproduct of using wood as fuel to cook their meat or worms or whatever it is they were eating. And the byproduct of using wood as the universal fuel were ashes. Now wood ashes are not carbon. Sometimes they have carbon in them and they're black or gray, but pure wood ashes from the hottest part of the fire are white, and they're just pure minerals. They're the minerals that were in that tree. Now, the number of minerals in a tree is a reflection of how many minerals were in the soil it grew in. So minerals that come from burning a tree or wood will be different depending on the source of that tree, right? It's kind of fascinating. This is a skeleton from a Neanderthal woman who's 40-something years old. She's got perfect hip joints, perfect knees, has all her own teeth. Now, why would these cavemen and women put a little clay pot full of wood ashes in their grave with them, and no jewelry and no gold and no statues? I mean, they had nothing in there, no tools and weapons like the Chinese and the Egyptians had. So even if you know nothing about anthropology and you know nothing of what I've already told you, you have to figure that those wood ashes were important to them. They meant something to them because every grave had a little pot full of wood ashes. They were supplementing with plant minerals. Plant minerals is what made them live 4 times the age of sexual maturity. It's what allowed them to live to be 40, 50, 60 years of age and have their own teeth. They didn't have dentists and to scrape their gums. They had periodontal disease and have crowns and root canals and all that kind of stuff. There's a great story in the Houston newspaper back, 4.5 years ago, July of 2004. And it's a story of the country of Bolivia in South America finding natural gas and oil reserves. They're displacing the indigenous people so they could nationalize these raw materials. And the story was very interesting, but what was really interesting was this picture of this fellow here, Bruno Paza, one of Bolivia's indigenous Amara Indians. He's holding a bowl of llama manure he's using as fuel to feed his cooking fire. Now, you know it's cold in his house, very typical of a place. The only place he's got heat is in that little wood stove. He's probably burning on the front end and freezing on his backsides. He's got 4 shirts on and a sweatshirt and a parka. His ear flaps are down in his house. No indoor plumbing, no electricity, no health insurance, no clinics and hospitals and doctors and pharmacies and pharmaceuticals, no Medicare. And what makes that story interesting is that in the National Geographic reference file, the Amara Indians live in this little boot heel of Bolivia up in the Andes Mountains, along with the northern Chileans and the southern Peruvians up in this one area. And these people here back in the early 2000s and the late 1900s were the longest lived people on Earth. They had 100-year-old per 500 people. 100-year-old per 500 people. We, with all our medical care and all the pharmaceuticals and all the hospitals and all the doctors and all the insurance, we have 100-year-old per 10,000. They have 20 times the 100-year-olds we do. They have 20 times the 100-year-olds we do. You would not want to go there for health care. The reason why they have 20 times the 100-year-olds we do is that they have raw materials. They have plant minerals from burning manure and grass and wood as fuel. But we've got doctors and drugs, right? Which would you rather have? Now, more recently, in Costa Rica, which just had an earthquake, and I got to kind of evaluate what happened there. There's a peninsula on the west coast of Costa Rica, which is a Central American country, and this Nicoya Peninsula, there's only 75,000 people there, but they're now considered the longest-lived people on Earth. Their average lifespan is 90. Their average lifespan is 90. They're a third world country, minus 10. They are so poverty-stricken, it's amazing, and yet they're the longest-lived people on Earth. Their life proceeds much the same way as it has for hundreds of years. They're very, very primitive. Their life proceeds much the way as it has for hundreds of years, and judging by the dusty villages where neighbors hang out on porches, or the rural homes where women still cook on ancient wood-burning stoves, you'd never guess that the Nicoya is the longest-lived place, they say in the Americas, but it's actually in the world, because they have 100-year-old per 300 people. We have 100-year-old per 10,000. Because they're still using wood stoves, they're still putting wood ashes or plant minerals into the garden as fertilizer. And I guarantee you, your grandparents and your parents put wood ashes into the garden as fertilizer. They're plant minerals. The tomatoes and the potatoes and beans and squash would take up those minerals. You'd eat them and you get your minerals that way. They'd also mix minerals in their food in various recipes. We're really clever now. We just go to the grocery store and buy something, they put baking powder or baking soda in there. Or maybe we're really clever and we make it ourselves, we're still putting baking powder and baking soda in there because it's too primitive to use wood ashes. By the way, we don't have access to wood ashes much anymore because at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, Monday, September 4th, 1882, we know the exact moment because this story was written up in pictures and text in every magazine and every newspaper in the world. 3 o'clock in the afternoon, Monday, September 4th, 1882, this fellow here, Thomas Edison, and his chief electrical technician pulled the switch and turned on the first commercial electric generating plant in New York City on Pearl Street on a bluff overlooking the construction of the Brooklyn Bridge. By 1909, there was no less than a dozen patented electrical appliances for the kitchen, including toasters and skillets and crock pots and blenders and steam irons and stoves and ice boxes. We tend to think those things as modern, but in 1909 you could buy them all out of the Sears catalog. By 1950, every town and every city in the United States had replaced wood as the universal fuel with electricity and natural gas and propane and heating oil and liquid paraffin and kerosene. And this is the most profound health question you'll ever have in your life, so listen up. When you use electricity and natural gas and propane and heating oils and liquid paraffin and kerosene as fuel, how many wood ashes are left over? How many wood ashes are there as a byproduct? Zero. And there was no politician, there was no doctor, there was no scientist who stood up and said, okay, we have all these wonderful things, they're going to bless society and make it better. However, the unintended consequence is you're not going to any longer in every household have easy access to a byproduct of daily living called wood ashes, plant minerals. And so now you're going to consciously have to supplement with these minerals to avoid all these diseases. Nobody said that. So now you are suffering from the little speech your doctor gave you if you ever asked the question, well, shouldn't I be taking some vitamins and minerals? And they say, oh, no, just eat well and you get everything you need. Doctors should be put in jail every time they said that. They'd never get out of jail because that's all they ever say, right?